Mr. Titan Sports China, augurandolo per buona fortuna per la partita di domani.
Good evening. Best of luck for tomorrow's game. And I'm thinking about your famous slogan, strong men, strong destinies. I think this team has a very strong mentality to have a strong destiny. But Italy have a number of new faces, and there are a number of new faces compared with 3 years ago. 11 players have been involved in a major tournament in the past. What do you think about that? That's the way it is. There are certain matches which ultimately dictate whether it's been a great tale or a tale to forget. So ultimately, the glory of your tale comes down to matches such as these. We've selected this squad because we believe we're working with top players. When I went to watch training sessions at all of the Italian clubs and I spoke to all of the individual players, I saw their desire to be involved and to be here. And their willingness, their desire, all of that is then translated into how willing they are to play in matches such as these. When you're part of the Italian national team, you do end up finding yourself in situations such as these. In terms of what I've seen, I like the way the players are conducting themselves in a number of different areas, of course. The game the other night wasn't really to my liking. It's something that we've analysed, we've spoken about it, and we have taken a step back in terms of what we'd seen in matches going into that one. But when you are working with the Italian national team and you're up against opposition sides, then the level is always very high. Any country these days can put together 20 players that know how to dictate the tempo, that know how to read the game, that have significant experience. So I expect to see that we've learned a great deal from the Spain game, even though we played badly. And even though it was a very painful defeat in terms of how the result panned out.
Buonasera mister, buonasera Alessandro, Dario Ricci, Radio 24.
Good evening, Alessandro. Good evening, Gaffer. For the Gaffer, when the going gets tough in a team, in a family, you ultimately say things to one another. Are you happy with the dialogue that you've had in the squad over the last few days? And for Alessandro, we can define Croatia as a frightening team, but they're certainly not at the peak of their powers. What concerns you the most about Croatia? What are you most wary of in terms of where you need to focus when you play Croatia? I'm delighted with what I've seen, and we haven't just gone through the motions in terms of what we've said to one another. Over the last few days, I've realized that I am dealing with a great group of players. You really can trust this group of players. You see how emotionally committed they are in terms of every single moment of the day, in terms of the order that they put in everything, in terms of how willing they are out on the pitch, how they take charge of things that don't only pertain to yourself, the fact that they want to actually show that they are up to the mark when it comes to self-confidence, and they also want to lighten the load for their teammates as opposed to simply asking for a helping hand. That would be the wrong way of doing things. I've probably been through a few more situations like these than they have, but despite the fact that many of them are young players and they're involved in extreme matches such as these for the first time, I think I have seen the right conduct in terms of going out there to play, to try and set things right, and to try and show that we have learned a lesson as well.
Allora, paura penso sia un aggettivo che non mi piace accostare al
I don't like fear as an adjective when it comes to football. Yeah, you know, you're not afraid in football. You feel fear when you're diagnosed with an illness or much more serious things than football. We've looked at Croatia and we've also saw that they created a number of opportunities despite losing 3-0 to Spain. They could have scored several goals. Rather than fear, we've got the utmost respect for them because we know a lot of the players in their squad. We know all of the experience they have. They played more than 80 games together, and often it doesn't actually happen that you've played so many games together at club level. So we have the utmost respect for Croatia, but I think the shellacking we got from Croatia the other day has taught us a lot. It's brought us together even more, if you will, because it's always easy to celebrate, be a group when you win. But when you lose, then you see the making of the man and the making of a player. And we want to show that tomorrow night, that we have learnt a lesson. Good evening. A question for both of you. It's the same question, but you can both answer it. People say that Croatia are coming to the end of a cycle and that they're an aging team. But that could be, there could be two sides to that coin. There are experienced players and they're also able to maybe provoke you, cause you problems. They might be able to make the game pan out in a certain way. We've spoken about formations and so on and so forth. But do you need a bit of that as well? Nous? You know, Spain were dribbling past you, nutmegging you, etc. You need to set up in a certain way on the pitch. Have you thought about that? Have you given that any thought? Yes, that's something that you did about 50 years ago. You know, you left a marker on someone, you gave someone a kick. You can't do that anymore. You need to try and take the sting out of the opposition's enthusiasm with our approach. And our approach, more than any technical ability or tactical approach, is about being bold and daring, showing self-confidence. That's what we were lacking against Spain. But as I've just said, it has taught us a great deal. We respect Croatia and we'll prove that tomorrow. Talk is cheap, so you need to actually go out there and walk the walk. So we want to walk the walk rather than talk the talk, because we've said certain things that we weren't able to then exhibit against Spain. And now coming back to what Alessandro was saying, we need to walk the walk and leave talk to one side.
I'm here. Italy definitely has more potential than we saw in both matches in tournament. It seems like that you are saving your battery, team battery, for next matches. Would this be the match which Italy shows more of it, or will keep it again, because a deuce is still enough to qualify?
Buonasera. No, non è così. Noi non ci siamo risparmiati per niente.
No, that's not the case. We've not been saving our performances at all. No, often we have a lot of energy because we had to actually, we expended a lot of energy by chasing the ball against Spain. But against Albania, we produced a different performance. You can't compare those two displays. But I think in both matches, we tried to do the same things. In one game we succeeded, on the other one we didn't. It's a simple way of analyzing things. So we need to see tomorrow night whether we have indeed learnt any lessons and whether we're able to do a good job of actually producing what it is we want to show on the pitch, because we want to play our own game regardless, even though Croatia are a more experienced team than us. In certain ways, they're a more skillful and technical side than we are. But regardless of any sprints or the intensity of the game itself, there will also come a time when we actually have to take the sting out of the game and manage proceedings as well. We need to do a good job of reading when it is to increase the tempo and when the time comes to actually reduce the tempo and try and just keep the ball to make sure the opposition don't get it. One for the gaffer and one for the player. Everyone has said a lot and written a great deal. Sorry, where are you? I'm over here. People have said that there will be changes compared with the Spain starting 11. Could you confirm that there will be changes? And for Alessandro, you're learning new aspects and new facets to the game, playing as a centre-back in a back four as opposed to playing in a back three, right? Of course, after a game like that, there is the notion and there is an idea to try and change the team a little bit. I probably made mistakes in not mixing things up quicker in terms of the performance that we produced. But I thought it would have actually been a gamble to have actually tweaked anything, because we saw everything that's been said in recent times. Now that we've noticed that there is a bit of fatigue, there is a bit of rust in terms of results and so on and so forth, we certainly will change certain things. Playing in a back four is different to playing in a back three. It's different to the way we operate at Inter, but ultimately these days in football positions don't count too often, because often at Inter I'm actually in a different position to the starting position that I occupy. So it comes down to footballing intelligence, your willingness to work hard, recognize certain passages of play, which ultimately can make the difference. I think that's what it's all about. That's the nuts and bolts of it, as opposed to a back three or back four.
Croatia, during your time in Inter, you have worked with Marcelo Brozovic and Ivan Perisic. Do you think that their experience could have important impact on tomorrow's game?
They can impact anything in a game of football, because they've got stamina, quality, experience. They have absolutely everything that you need to make a team play good football. They're also getting on a bit, given that they're experienced. They're also of a certain age, but they are two excellent footballers. And I have fond memories of them during my time at Inter. And we're on very good terms. We occasionally still text one another. And I still love them just as I did when they were my players. So I'm looking forward to seeing them again. And I really believe that they will make life hard for us. But that's what football's all about. That's what's great about football. We'll see whether we are ready or better to actually showcase our freshness, because that's the direction we need to go down when you come up against some big players in world football. We need to try and outpace them and show greater intensity than them. They'll need to recover as well occasionally and chase back. But they're two wonderful men and two excellent footballers.
Bonsoir, coach. C'est pas possible en français, j'ai essayé en English.
Captain Spalletti, do you think Italy now is lacking in talent in this time, and needs time to return in top level for Italy?
Ma io non richiedo niente, a me questo gruppo è piaciuto.
No, I don't think
Quando
it
me lo
does
sono
take time.
immaginato, ho
I
creduto
like
di
this squad of
poter
players.
fare
When I imagined
delle
them,
ottime
I
cose.
believed that we could achieve excellent
Fino a
things.
questo momento qui, proprio nei giorni trascorsi
And
insieme,
until
si
now,
faceva un po' d'analisi con la
in the
squadra
last
di
few
tutto
days that we
quello
spent
che è stato
together, we've actually
il
been
nostro
analysing
percorso,
things
perché al di là
with
di
the
quelli che
team in
sono
terms of the journey
le
we've been
idee,
on.
le parole,
Because
bisogna
besides the
andare a
ideas
vedere
and
quello
all
che
the
abbiamo fatto
talk,
e che
you
abbiamo
actually need to
portato a
go
casa,
and see
perché
what
è
we've
quella poi la
tangibly
risposta
achieved and what
reale
we've actually
che ti dà
brought
la
home, because
dimensione
that is
di
the
dove
actual
stai
concrete
andando, ecco.
result that gives you an idea of where it is you're
Ancora
headed.
magari ci sarebbe bisogno di qualche step in più per andare a
It might
fare
take a few more
poi
steps
quello che ci siamo detti, però
in order for us to actually achieve what we've said to one another.
per cui bisogna prendere
But
subito
we
la
can't get our
scorciatoia,
hands on
bisogna
that
fare delle
time, so we
sintesi,
need to
bisogna
find a shortcut.
essere
We
pronti,
need
perché
to
queste
summarize things as quickly as
sono queste le
possible. We need to be
partite,
ready,
come si diceva
because
prima,
it's
che
matches
fanno
such as
diventare la
these, as we were
storia
saying
di
earlier
tutti gli
on,
anni.
that ultimately dictates whether it's a grand, glorious tale or one to forget.
Thank you. A question in English, please. Good evening, Mr. Spalletti. I'm Yue from Xinhua News Agency. We know many fans in the world deeply love the philosophy of Italian football, which includes the solid and beautiful defense, resilience, and efficient counterattack. How do you inspire the younger generation to play with those qualities in the match tomorrow night? Will we see the familiar taste of Italian football tomorrow night? Thank you.
Mhm. Ma secondo me ormai in questo calcio qui non è più fare soltanto
I
una
think
cosa,
when
bisogna
it comes
saperne
to
fare di
modern
più una.
football, you need to
Perché quando
know
ci
how to do
avranno
several
palla gli
things as
altri,
opposed to just
vista la
focusing
qualità
on
che
one
hanno,
thing,
qualche
because
volta
when the
saremo
opposition have the
costretti
ball,
a
given the
tutte le
ability they
limitazioni
have, there will come
in
times when
11
we'll need to actually
calciatori e
defend
rimanere col
with all
doppio
11 men on the
spallapasso,
pitch
e
and make
poi
sure that we
quando
sit deep with a low block.
riconquisteremo la palla, cercare di
And when we win the
ribaltare
ball
l'azione
back,
negli
then we
spazi
will need
senza
to try and
permettergli
actually
agli
counter
avversari
in
di
the free space
ricomporre una
without
fase
allowing the
difensiva
opposition to get
corretta.
their shape back and defend correctly.
È chiaro che farlo tutta la partita, mentre un
Doing
po' di
so
tempo fa,
for
qualche anno
all
fa,
90
si
minutes,
poteva fare.
whilst a few short
Io il
years ago that
calcio
was
che
still
va verso il
possible,
sempre più moderno, la vedo più
in this new
complessa
modern
questa
brand of
cosa qui,
football,
di
I think it's
difendersi
more
sempre basso e
challenging
chiudere
to do that,
soltanto
to always
con
defend
delle
deep
ripartenze, anche perché
and
le squadre
simply
avversarie,
counter,
come ho detto,
because the opposition sides, as I've said,
tutte
international
nella
teams
possibilità di comporre
all have the
una squadra
opportunity
forte da un punto. Ormai i
to
calciatori
put
delle
together a
nazionali,
very
di
strong
qualsiasi nazionale,
side.
giocano
All
per tutte le
international
squadre
players
del mondo,
these
in tutte
days
le
play
squadre
for
top.
teams all over the world, and they all
Anzi,
play for top teams.
noi siamo quella che ha bisogno
In fact, we're the
che
team
alcuni calciatori dell'Italia
that
vadano
actually
a fare
need some of
esperienza
our
all'estero.
Italian players to go abroad and
Squadre
get some
top
experience overseas
a
for
livello
some of the
europeo.
top teams in European football.
Sport Italia, mister, per te una più prosaica, fatto salvo
Una
che
più?
prosaica, più
Scusa. Sì, sì.
e fatto salvo che non ci darai piste giustamente su
Besides the fact that you won't give us a steer on the team news,
cambiare qualcosa, ti riferisci
when you
semplicemente
talk about
agli
changing
interpreti,
things,
nel senso che ci vuole
are
anche
you
molta
referring
esperienza
to
per la
the
terza partita
personnel in
in
terms of
10
having fresh
visto che la
faces for the
Croazia è
third game in 10
differente
days,
rispetto
or
all'Albania,
given that
alla Spagna,
Croatia are
quindi
different
cambiare
to
anche qualcosa
Albania and Spain? Are you
nell'approccio,
planning on
nell'attitudine di squadra.
tweaking
E
your
invece per
approach
Alessandro,
to the match? And question
se
for
avete
Alessandro.
discusso anche tra di voi di un elemento di ferocia
Have you guys also
agonistica,
spoken
lo posso utilizzare
amongst
per-
yourselves about that
che
competitive
deve essere presente
fire
domani, perché,
that
la
you need to
Croazia
show
già da
tomorrow
maturità, è una
night?
generazione che
Because
potrebbe essere
regardless of their
all'ultimo
ability,
della stanze,
Croatia
e non
might have their last dance with this group of players, and they don't want to be remembered as a team that went out in the group stage and they drew in the 95th minute against Albania. So they'll be really fired up for it, won't they? Shall I go first? Thank you.
Uso la sua parola. Cambieremo anche qualche attitudine di squadra perché
I'll use your words. We'll actually change our approach in some ways because we need some guarantees in terms of continuity, in terms of the way we play, resilience, because that's what the match requires. You can't necessarily consider that you might have to actually withstand certain situations that the opposition can then make the most of. So we'll try and have as much substance out there as possible. We'll try and be, maybe play uglier, but ultimately have greater substance to make sure that they can't necessarily tap into their ability. But we also want to play the game in their half of the pitch. We don't want to just sit on the edge of our own penalty area. That's always dangerous and risky. They've got some excellent players who can shoot from distance. They've got players that can play between the lines. They can get in behind the defensive line as well. They know exactly where to position themselves on the pitch. So we want to keep the ball as well, besides being cautious and switched on as a team. As I said a little earlier on, regardless of the technical mistakes and the passes we misplaced, we also got our approach wrong against Spain. I think that also stemmed from the fact that we weren't able to control proceedings and have ball possession. The more you get on the ball, the greater you grow in confidence, as opposed to, when you have to sit deep, it's harder to do so. The more we're able to keep the ball, the more we're able to move them around, the better it'll be for us. Good evening. Good evening to both. I wanted to ask the gaffer, coming back to what we're saying about what could change, you spoke about stamina and the team being a bit sluggish and also being a bit stretched. Those were the issues that cropped up against Spain, and also technical errors as well. Could we conceive of a striker that might be less isolated with two more attacking wingers? So we could have Retegui or Scamacca, but could we have two more attacking wingers that can also track back? Stefan El Shaarawy, for instance. Could he be a surprise inclusion in the team? And to Bastoni, I wanted to ask you whether you have experienced a bit of fear over the last few days. You were very disappointed, but have you overcome that fear having spoken to the coach? Everything's possible. Anything's possible. Because we've brought all of these players with us to Germany, so anything is possible. But wingers that dribble past opposition players that are good in 1v1 situations also need the team's substance in order for them to be in a position to play the game in a certain way that they want to. You need that team play that allows for you to actually operate in the opposition half. You need to get the right shape. You need to be neat and tidy and orderly on the pitch, which allows those wingers to then engage in a number of 1v1 duels. Because in order to have those 1v1 situations, you need to push the opposition back so then they chase towards their own goal. But then the entire team suffers as a result and the opposition struggle. It all comes down to the level of football you're able to produce. It's not this, that or the other, just which comes about in midfield. You always need to think about things from 360 degrees when it comes to the team. But everything's possible. I'll repeat what I said at the start of the press conference. There's no such thing as fear in football. There's no place for fear in it, and there's no reason for it either. We have, of course, spoken about what happened against Spain. We've analysed that, and we've understood what our mistakes were. When you lose, you either get down in the dumps or you try and find additional motivation to do better than you did on the previous occasion. Fortunately, football always gives you a second chance. Football always gives you a second chance. So we can't wait to get out there tomorrow night.
Question, I kindly remind you that just one question per journalist. Thank you.
I wanted to ask the head coach if we can consider Federico Di Marco as unavailable for selection or whether he can recover in time. And now Alessandro was speaking about the desire. It feels like the team are ready to react. How has the psychological recovery gone? Because it's difficult. A game like that can really hurt the team's self-belief in terms of the journey you're on. Di Marco is fit again, so he is available for selection. But we will have another fitness test tomorrow morning in order to confirm what we've seen and in terms of how he's felt today and yesterday. The doctor's analysis and so on and so forth. But everything points to the fact that he'll be available for selection tomorrow night. Psychological recovery. That's something you do very quickly, because if we don't get a result, we're off home. That's the psychological recovery. It's about being honest with one another, speaking clearly to each other. They know it. You know, we're dealing with consummate professionals. So being wary and treading on eggshells, and when it comes to saying things, you actually need to be very short and sweet, and you need to quickly make progress in order to earn your place in life and earn credit in life, because life goes very quickly. The high-speed train in Italy spends 5 seconds in the station. Either you're ready to jump aboard, or if not, you stay on the platform and you're walking home. No, we don't want to do like he does. I wanted to ask you, two players and one in particular have come in for criticism. Giovanni Di Lorenzo, how has he reacted? You coached him at Napoli, he was excellent there. Have you decided to keep him in the team? Have you spoken to him? Probably everyone would have struggled against Nico Williams, but how will he approach the game? Have you felt the need to give him a rest? And the same goes for Jorginho. A question about both players. That's a bit easier for me, because he really is like a son to me, Giovanni Di Lorenzo, in terms of the amount of time we spent together, in terms of how much I've spoken to him, and I really rate him across the board, so I always struggle to do without a player of Di Lorenzo's ability. Of course, there are things that I need to analyze. But I really believe in terms of the ability of the man and the ability of the player. I don't need to speak to him too much, because we really see eye to eye to such an extent. You know, we can, of course, speak to one another, but we're on the same wavelength. You see when someone gets back on the training pitch the following day what their intentions are. And Jorginho, I know him less than Di Lorenzo, but he probably was under par against Spain. But it all comes down to how well the team is able to play as a whole. You know, you've got this camera in my face. It's perfect. But that's what I said to him, and if you can leak more information like that, but if we're able to manage ball possession, then great. But if we can't, then poor old Jorginho, it's not his fault, it's my fault, because in terms of what I thought we could do, that didn't come to pass, and therefore Jorginho's in the midst of all of that. It's not his fault, I'm to blame. So it all comes down to that. This is what football's all about. Football ultimately comes down to the sort of match that you play. Jorginho has incredible ability that none of the other players have. And he also tells everyone how they need to conduct themselves. And we don't have too many of those out there on the pitch. But of course, we do have other players that are there, that are pushing him, that have the potential. They might be a bit more physically fresh, they might have greater energy to what Jorginho can naturally offer, because Jorginho was born this way. He has a few issues on that score, because it's not like he can go and score headers. He's not going to win an aerial challenge. But when he takes charge of the team, that's who he is. We really believe a great deal in Jorginho, whether he's played one or less half of football. What did you make of Andrea Cambiaso coming off the bench the other night? And Alessandro, how do you feel playing with Riccardo Calafiori? I thought Andrea Cambiaso looked good, besides the fact that on 2 or 3 occasions he was dragged into an area of the pitch where he wasn't supposed to be. That's not what we asked him to do. It got a little bit confused and a little bit muddled in terms of his position on the pitch. But that can happen. It's only natural that when you follow an opposition player, you go and press, the guy goes between the lines. He tracks his opposition player because he sees that there's space in behind that can hurt us, but then when we get the ball back, then he finds himself in that area of the pitch. I chose these players. They haven't ordered these players for me. Cambiaso is one of those players. He looks like an intelligent kid in terms of how much I know him. I still need to get to know him a bit more. I like the way he does things. He can operate in several positions. In this footballing family, he's someone who fits in very well. But we still need to see whether we're able to do that, because in the last game, we weren't able to do so. In the penultimate game, yes. 2 games ago, yes, but not in our most recent game. No, I like playing with Calafiori. He's got incredible ability. And he has no fear of getting on the ball, and he reminds me of what I was like 3 or 4 years ago. And he does what the coach asked us to do, and playing in, I'd like to stress what the coach was saying, you grow playing certain matches like these. So I hope that we can increase our affinity on the pitch over time.
Now I'm going to get the first one question in remote. Michel de Blasis. Yeah, Michele? Michele? No, we can't hear you, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.